Oh, my timers are off again. Oh, well. Let me just check things, check levels, all that stuff. Check. Okay.
And I will not let you down.
But it's not the best. I'm going to keep using that. That's now a button. So I'm back in the studio part, but I'm still using the old computer. I haven't had a chance to set it all up, but I will get there. But I've got my buttons. But I want to show a clip just quickly because I said this morning. I said, petition, okay? I want Donald Trump to go to jail, okay? But, obviously, I don't want him to go to jail if he hasn't done anything wrong. If he's guilty and he goes to jail, can we make his cell like the dome from the Truman Show, please? Can we just give him his own prison with cameras everywhere and just put like everyone in like there and just pretend that he's in his life and like then he can't run for president. It's just contained. He's president of that little world and we just put cameras on and be done with it. That seems like a way for everyone to just move forward, okay? That said, I find it fascinating talking of just as a quick segue about this whole Trump situation, which is, come on, like Cornel West has a point where, who's responsible for the rise of fascism ultimately? Is it the people who are trying their luck with fascism, or is it the party that's pretending that everything's fine, putting people who are having actual fucking strokes in front of everybody, all these million-year-old people, it's embarrassing. And it's like, okay, well, maybe, it's really weird that this is the pool of candidates that we've got. Anyway, I try to stay out of American politics beyond the spectacle or the culture wars analysis. But, I just wanted to make that point. That would be the best like in America, a lot of their judges and stuff, they're really good at that, sandwich board sort of like punishment fitting the crime shit, where it's like, the judge has a lot more discretion. So if you are the judge who is like trialing Donald Trump's case, I would like that the fitting punishment for Donald Trump would that be a punishment? Anyway, it would, punishment, solution, way to forward is to make it a reality show. And let's move on. Okay. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Matt. Hello. Okay. So, but I just want to show you this because this fucking idiot, okay, like, how do you hate him?
He thinks he looks good in a bathing suit. He doesn't.
Oh, that's a button. I want the show the full thing. Hang on. Well, that ruined that joke, didn't it?
Joe Biden's only campaign strategy is indicting me. That's all they can do. Keep indicting him on nonsense. Going on extended vacations and sleep, sleep, sleep. That's what he wants to do. He wants to sleep and he wants to go to the beach and sleep. He thinks he looks good in a bathing suit. He doesn't.
He released like a whole heap of videos. It's like how it's just too funny. But anyway, that's now a button.
He thinks he looks good in a bathing suit. He doesn't.
So anyway, good morning. It's been a little while. I go in and out of burnout. Thinks he looks good in a bathing suit. He doesn't. How is that not fucking hilarious? But this is the problem. Like, you need someone with us. Like, you can't compete with that, with average voters. Like, your average person is like in Australia. You can't compete with Pauline Hanson. You can't, with a certain demographic. And those people, unfortunately, tend to decide elections. So it's just, it's funny. Anyway, doesn't mean I agree. It means that, some of his videos are pretty bad, but fucking hell. Okay, so we're talking about the ABC, and I wanted to lead in with that because, I think I feel like it's okay to acknowledge that something is funny, okay, and like not support the politics of the person. And my mate, not everything, okay, is a culture wars issue. Not everything that you look at through the world is through the lens of like weirdos on Twitter or X, okay? Not everything is political, okay? Not every single thing, like whether this is about like Jordan Peterson's recent thing about like his thing with the psych board, it's not always about speech or freedom of speech. We have rules, we have laws, we have strategies, we have processes and things, guidelines and like various physical aspects to the world that exist outside of your brainworms. Whatever brainworms you seem to have caught, okay, they're brainworms. Doesn't mean that that's how like the world is working. Now, the fact that everyone in charge seems to be having strokes in front of everyone, being a stand-up comic fascist over here, fucking absolutely
and I will not let you
insane.
Down.
Right? It doesn't mean that that everything comes back to some bollocks culture war, especially a bollocks US culture war that doesn't affect us. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of history, okay? I'm still kind of amping up for the stream. It's been a little while since I've done it. And also I just had a little bit of drama before like the stream. So I had to fucking... So if I'm sort of, poorly performing, because, I always usually perform well, it's, it's not, it's just, it takes me a while to warm up. But like not everything has to be a fucking like drama, okay? And in the case of like, and I know that it's, because everyone's got 30-second memories that, we've kind of got to, I got to remind you of what happened, which was that ABC, our national broadcaster, okay, generally well respected unless you're on Twitter and in the culture wars and being a fuckstick. Generally, the ABC is a net gain in this media ecosystem, okay? And like they basically decided to leave X, okay? So they've, it was framed as them leaving X, okay? And you may have seen Captain Fuckstick, Mr. Musk, actually sort of turning it into some sort of weird culture wars issue. Like, his attitude towards media, like, is especially state media, is something that I'm not comfortable with, because obviously, like, he has a lot of power and a lot of influence, and the general role of like the government broadcaster, when it's working well, is that it generally provides, it's a non-commercial entity in theory, because obviously we live in capitalism. There's no such thing as an independent non-commercial entity under this sort of global capitalist thing. We're all stuck in this, okay? But we're all, working as much as we can. The ABC is forced to compete. We've had a Liberal government for, X number of years that have gradually just made them, turn them into, a commercial entity without the ability to actually fully be one. So, they've been struggling to have, like a kind of independent voice. They're struggling to survive. They've sort of got less funding. Having to compete in a media ecosystem that, is already super competitive. And, the role of our national broadcaster is still quite an important one, especially when you factor in sort of, regional and remote radio and that sort of stuff, right? Again, it's not all about fucking Twitter or X, okay? We're going to call it Twitter to the end of time, aren't we? So, so basically, like, what I'm going to try and do is take you back a little bit to why, like, these media outlets got onto social media in the first place, and why, like, it's like, it's always a different way to look at things. And the lens of the culture wars, okay, it is the least healthy. It is the least, like, it's not critical thinking, okay? You're just punching at clouds all the time. You're punching at imaginary enemies that don't exist based on some, sit back and think about the internet, okay? You're basically having a party in your own mind. You are making stuff up. You are imagining things, okay? They're not actually happening outside of these little devices, okay? If you put that device down, things cease to exist. We live in a media ecosystem and an internet that is now dominated by that, like, corporate media, okay? Whether you agree or not, X is still corporate. They're still gargling the balls of corporations. They're going to have to. We all exist in a system, okay? But that doesn't exist. And if you're sitting there all day, like, and I'm guilty of it too, okay? A lot of the reason why I rant the way that I rant, even though I say you, I'm talking to myself as much as I am anyone else, okay? I just am good at rhetoric, so I say you, okay? But there's I'm doing a projection exercise of sorts, right? Which is that I'm talking to myself and my own fucking habits around social media as well. Which is that, if I didn't have this as a job and a vocation, and for the most part stuck here because I'm, 45 and I can't really do anything else, I would use it a lot less. It's not real, okay? A lot of the stuff that you are seeing on social media, especially X, is small clips of, like, out of context stuff, okay? Selectively shared. Okay, it is the same shit over and over again. You are being flooded with propaganda all day, every day, non-stop. It is just a dopamine factory where you are the hamster with the little water ball going dopamine, cortisol, adrenaline, non-ephedrine. What's the other ones? Those things, dopamine, 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 dopamine. That's what your brain's doing. Dopamine, dopamine, cortisol, dopamine, dopamine. Oh, the day's gone. That's what's happening, okay? And so you're not getting an accurate sense of what the world is like. And the ABC leaving X is just is a really stupid example of that, because they're first of all, they're a public company, public broadcaster, okay, which means that they have to operate in the public interest. First up, okay, their first obligation, in theory, is the public interest, okay? So the ABC doesn't have to operate in, have a commercial imperative, even though the government has over the years tried to put that in place, okay? The ABC survives through a number of really great assets, such as, I'm trying to think of is Bluey so those sort of children's TV, comedy shows, various other things. They've got some key properties that actually do really well, and they sell merch and all that sort of stuff. And so the way that they make their money, it's not the same as sort of clicks and views as such, okay, because they don't sell ads. In theory, we all live in a system. Everyone's for sale, okay? I'm saying, everyone is an ad where there's no ad. So I'm not going to lie to you and say that the ABC doesn't sell ads, because of course it does. It sells ads for the military industrial complex, and it, does sort of, it's a mouthpiece for certain viewpoints and that sort of stuff. But let's go simple, okay? The ABC, in theory, operates for the public interest. Okay, they're a public broadcaster. They are for everyone. Part of our taxes goes towards funding this broadcaster, at odds with commercial media networks that are largely dominated by Rupert Murdoch. Okay, and that's like Channel 10 and Foxtel and those sorts of things. Then you've got Channel 9. I think that's still Fairfax. And then you've got Channel 7, which is we've got very concentrated media in this country. Okay, they play an important role, and up against streaming services and all of that sort of stuff. Obviously, the ABC has resource constraints. They have to also compete in a commercial landscape where they don't necessarily have the ability to raise money the way that a commercial outlet would. Okay, because most of the media is funded by ads, whether you like it or not. It's just how it is, and that's why what we're seeing with X. Like I talked about this with the last stream about if you think that you're going to be able to say the horrible shit that you're saying now as much and make money. You have to make a decision, okay? You have to make a choice. Now, what I want is some transparency around that, because the difference between, say, ACMA and Twitter or X and their terms of service and their opaque rules, okay, this idea of there being toxicity, okay, and that being a black box and not defining what that is, and that being at the mercy of a non-Australian corporation. That's who's deciding that, right? Is it evangelical Christians deciding what isn't correct language? Is it, the CCDH, which I've covered? Is it the, is it the CIA? Is it the fucking Democrats? Is it the Republicans? Is it the FBI in the US? Is it the AFP here? Is it the Department of Home Affairs? Who's deciding it? There's no transparency around that. We want to know what the rules are. Now, terms of service, that's not the rules. The terms of service are, they're as much a marketing document as anything else. I want the details, please. Okay. And that's where opening up the algorithm and those sorts of things is a good thing. But at the same time, you have to remember that, Brad, if you think that brands are going to advertise on X with the dog shit engagement bait that's going at the moment, they're not going to. There might be some that do, and I've talked about that before. There's going to be some who, again, at the end of the day, online marketing, digital strategy is about where your audience is, okay? So if there's an audience where you want to sell Bugattis and fucking Rolexes to dipshits, or you want to sell Dogecoin for a pump and dump, or you want to sell, Temu fucking, Alibaba bullshit till the cows come home, or you want to sell bad T-shirts, you want to sell T-shirts like I'm doing, like I've got, okay, and those sorts of things, then of course there's going to be advertisers that are quite happy to advertise there. But I think that you need to be a little more pragmatic and understand that the experience of Twitter/X is garbage for the most part, okay? They're not addressing, even this morning, I saw there's an engineer on there who is basically saying, well, you can monetize your haters. And I'm like, okay, so who's putting ethical guardrails around that? Who's protecting the creators from the harms, their mental health? Who's protecting society over this monetization? That's bad. We need to zoom out from that and see that and go, that has a net negative for society. Yes, individuals might make money, but you look at someone like Tim Pool. Do you think Tim Pool is a classic example of somebody who monetizes his haters? Okay. The best thing that anyone can do for people like Pearl Davis or Tim Pool or like Andrew Tate or those sorts of people, okay, or is just mute them and not engage with them. But people are so idiot, dopamine. I said something I don't like. Dopamine. Like they can't help themselves. Like the impulse control is just, it's gone now. Okay. So, we have to accept that that's going to happen. But, I just try to say, just mute them and move on. Like they're obviously just trying to get engagement bait. They're just rage bait. They're just basically, and I know how cynical operators like Tim Pool would operate, which is that he would basically be approaching brands like various things, and he would be making brand deals and making them, suggesting that they buy ads on X, and that, he'd be making deals in the background to monetize this stuff and saying, look, because I've actually looked at the ad buying platform on Twitter. They finally put it back on, and I'm going to keep calling it Twitter because the ad platform is still called Twitter. But I've looked at that platform, okay? And like you can actually just target specific user accounts. So there's no reason why Tim Pool can't be making, and Pearl Davis and those sorts of people can't be directly approaching advertising agencies at this point, or advertisers direct, and going, you know what, you run ads on my account, I'll run this content, and I'll get people mad, and I don't have any ethics or scruples or any fucking consideration for anything other than, my bottom line and your bottom line. Like that is just going to be the strategy, because we work in a race to the bottom industry now, and that's why I quit. We live in the race to the bottom, and there's nobody going, you know what, there's a hard line here because this actually has a political consequence, and we end up with people like Trump, okay? As much as I think that it's hilarious, obviously that has a serious it's not benign. And I've been saying this for years and years and years and years, that this is not benign. You can't just go monetize the haters and say stupid shit like that, okay? Same thing with Elon Musk. I will praise Elon Musk where Elon Musk needs praise. I will criticize him where he needs criticizing. He doesn't care what I've got to say either fucking way, so I'm going to say what I want, okay? Which is that, he's not helping in certain areas with this culture wars bollocks, which is going to war with public broadcasters who don't have, they're working under constraints. They're putting no effort in to actually, engage with these. I mean, it might all be theatrics. I'm sure that like the team behind the scenes is engaging with the ABC, because the ABC would have an account manager and all that sort of stuff. I'm speaking generally. But, like the ABC's, like the classic example of this is the ABC's announcement that they were leaving. Like, first of all, they weren't leaving, okay? They were consolidating their accounts. Now, if you've been paying attention to anything beyond the last 2 minutes ago, okay, they were, they've been consolidating that for a while, okay? So ABC, when they first, okay, let's just go back. Go back to, 2011. When I'd been doing digital for a while and this social media thing took off and everyone was sort of I was the go-to person before the ad agencies moved in and decided to fuck everything up because they have no idea of the political and psychological and social consequences of what they're doing. Okay. And I was one of those people. I didn't think it through. It was a blind spot. This is the blind spot that I keep talking about. But the sell for ABC, for Channel 10, for any corporation, for any brand account, but particularly like something like the ABC, which was that you could reach your audience, you could engage, you've got built-in content, right? So the ABC has content, like they can do clips, they can do stuff, very low effort, low cost, not resource intensive, because they're already producing content. I had this conversation with the ABC back then. I had, obviously I have had these meetings over the years. I've had it with, what's the fucking Fairfax thing? Can't remember. Anyway, that lot. And I've had, I've obviously helped and consulted on these things over the years in the background. And a lot of the sell was that they basically, if you are in media, you're already producing content. This is just a matter of repurposing and re-editing and adding like clips into your workflow, says Taya, the person who never does clips. But it's just a matter of adding clips into your workflow, or taking snippets or taking bits and pieces, and it's sort of ready built. And you can just automate and run a lot of that stuff at fairly low cost. And as long as you invest in a social media manager or two, it would actually be fairly low cost, low resource intensive, and it's cheaper than having to sort of pay for commercial advertising. So for something like the ABC, where, you know, obviously cost is a factor, the ability to advertise is sort of low, like they can only really advertise on other ABC sort of outlets. So it was an opportunity for the ABC to sort of branch out, you know, out of their cocoon, so to speak, or their ecosystem, and sort of reach new audiences, right? And especially, and that's, I think social media was probably a big part of how things like Bluey took off, right? And how things like, you know, the bananas in pajamas and those sort of assets, how they took off was being discovered through social media and through streaming services, and sort of being able to break out. Now, I know that there's like sales behind the scenes. I'm just being oversimplifying, but I'm just saying, right? But the big sell for someone like the ABC at the time was micro community. The idea of just like this micro community where you are engaging. So sensibilities have shifted in social, because in the early days of social, it was sort of, you had the ABC logo, but it still had to be personalized, okay? One of my things was nobody wants to talk to a logo. They want to talk to a person, and they want to connect. And it was kind of like a really very brief honeymoon period before the fucking agencies like and consulting firms and everyone took over, right? It was, and started measuring everything and sort of ruining everyone's fucking day, right? With all of this stuff. But the sell and the thing for people like me who are independent consultants in this stuff was that if they just had a few staff members that were just interacting, right, like with people, like customer service, and they had a customer focused attitude, and were just engaging in banter, like one of the early ones was like Heath from Coles, or those sorts of people. Like I very much encourage, I would help design those teams and recruit for those teams. That was a big part of what I used to do, and advise them on that strategy, that sort of top down, how to shift and stuff. Obviously, companies aren't good with change, so they just implemented it poorly. And then the advertising agencies moved in and ruined it for everybody, because it was all about sort of nudging and numbers and data-driven marketing, and it became cynical and monetizing the hate, where the numbers were neutral. The numbers had no, it wasn't actually user-centered or society-centered or ethical in any way. It was just ones and zeros and nudges and needles and fucking all that sort of stuff, right? So that was actually this, that was kind of a little bit of that history, right? But it was just, so I think there was a big shift around 2011, 2012. Sort of all the journos moved in, all the ad agencies moved in, the mainstream corporate media saw a buck, but individual journalists also saw ways to network with other journalists and progress their career. So you had, the blog rags like Gawker and stuff networking with mainstream media on those platforms, and a lot of them just became sort of, hacks, and they became career oriented, and they didn't give a fuck about their audience or their users or even the issues that they were covering. They were just all in it for themselves, right? But then you had, your sort of core journalists, people who used to be journalists, and there's still a couple, but not that many, hanging out on Twitter because they were sourcing it for news. And I've talked about that before, how, a lot of corporate, especially Murdoch journos and, the West here used to use me all the time for, they just harvest Twitter for stories and use your tweets and your jokes and stuff as content, and you would see nothing for it other than, attracting lunatics in my case. But, it was just, so that was what shifted. But so the actual the value for the ABC was that it was lower cost, okay? They could reach new audiences, okay? That was the value proposition, okay? And to go micro community. So every show would have its own social media account, okay? So, I love Hard Quiz is one of my favorite shows, right? I love that fucking show. I love Tom Gleason. He's funny. The Hard Quiz had its own Twitter account, Facebook. So every time you had a new show, you'd use those social media accounts to push and build buzz and sort of banter back and forth with those. You would tag them, so you'd, at Project TV, and you'd create that ecosystem of banter. And if you were good at it, or any good at it, which most were not, it became a commercial messaging thing. Again, I was there. I was the one who was sitting there talking HR and marketing out of doing that shit on social media and understanding that they had to show up as humans first, have a conversation, be authentic. Remember how that word was stolen? Be authentic. Not just don't be authentic and say anything that would offend anyone. And you don't know what will offend anyone, and they're going to put you on a list. Remember that? Remember that? Oh, what innocent times. Anyway, the sell was that, which was that it was low cost. It wouldn't cost as much as commercial media. If anything, it was supposed to disrupt it. Okay, it wasn't supposed to become a massive programmatic, disgusting, unethical, I would say evil industry. It was supposed to disrupt the advertising industry, not be usurped by it. We tried, guys. I'm sorry. You know, branded content and those sorts of things were supposed to be sort of a win-win. You know, I've talked about that before. And but the ABC initially, like I said, they would set up individual show accounts. Like, you know, every time they had a show, they'd have a Twitter account. But over time, obviously, that stuff became resource intensive. And it became, because all of the assholes and fucksticks moved in, and all of the like culture wars and like Trump and fucking all the political, the Americans showed up basically and started ruining everyone's day. So rather than, and also this, the big shift on Twitter that you saw back in the day was that shift away from sort of local little hubs and little community sort of, you know, so Twitter used to be sort of somewhat of a hub and spoke. If you know, think of a hub and a spoke, you know, spokes of a wheel, and they sort of connect. So you had hubs and spokes, right? Rather than it being sort of a hub and spoke of lots of little localized communities, it became this big algorithmic mess dominated by culture wars and US and clout chasers and like all of the worst behavior and people. The things that were going viral were the worst things. Those little local groups were splitting in two. I've talked about Coriander Gate before. And, you know, and sort of how Perth Twitter and, you know, P-Tub and the Melbourne Twitter and those sort of little ecosystems, how those sort of split. And but you also had people who would build in. So I came out of the sort of Perth Twitter influencer thing. I was like considered like influential, whatever the fuck that means. And but eventually, as an influencer, you would connect with other influencers in other places. But then you'd create this sort of influencer thing. And because I was working with sort of celebrities and famous people and, you know, all that sort of stuff, you drift away from your roots. And that's a normal drift, like that happens. But it happens a lot. You know, I mean, that, yeah, but again, it just became dominant. Anyway, I'm talking too long, but the original thing, the original approach was to go small per show, niche, localized. So 720 Perth, that's the local ABC radio station here. They had their own little Twitter account. They'd talk direct about the shows that are specifically programming on their shows. And, you know, but that became obviously impossible. Like, over time, it didn't scale very well. And so what you started to have these tools. So for a very small amount of time, you had things like Sprout Social and Radian 6. Radian 6 was sort of the big, you know, the enterprise grade software like tool at the time. All of these sort of Hootsuite, I mean, you know, at the sort of smaller level, you know, you had these sorts of tools where it became easier to manage it. But over time, those social media managers couldn't even manage it. So you end up having to have lots and lots of seats. Then you also have that software. The way that software is priced is per seat. So over time, at the cost, so you've got an FTE cost. So that means like a full-time equivalent of staff, right? That's a full-time job. So the FTE blew out, okay, that we were at the not so much for the ABC. They were probably spending money, but they, you know, boosting posts and Facebook, that stuff was starting to add up. So AdWords, Facebook ads, they were no longer like it used to be that you could get like an ad campaign running for a few dollars, but AdWords and Facebook ads and everything like that became so saturated with bollocks and scams, and like you got flooded out by the corporation, you got flooded out by those with more money. You got crowded out by, like for me in my industry, I think I've talked about the SEO industry before, where you couldn't run any kind of AdWords campaign. You couldn't even SEO your website under Perth Web Design. You just couldn't do it because basically the big agencies moved in and they had unlimited money to be able to, first of all, keep up with SEO. And second of all, they would, obviously had the money to boost it with AdWords, and they could just, again, use them. They could just buy it all. Like, it's just bought and bought and bought. And the independent guys who were just trying to do their thing, get crowded out. We've seen that happen so many times over the years with, it happened with SEO. It happened with, if you want to see the race to the bottom and how it leads, you start in SEO and work out from there to social media, because everything that happened years ago with SEO and everything that happened years before that with websites and stuff like that happened later on with social, where eventually everyone who was organic or legit or ethical or, independent got crowded out by those with blank checks, right? That was just what happened to the industry. And that's where we are now. And that's why I always say there's no such thing as organic. Like, if you are getting more than a handful of likes, someone is, you're helping somebody, and you should probably get clear on who that is. As long as you know who it is, then you're fine, okay? But if you're being sort of unwittingly nudging audiences in certain political directions and just going, well, I am who I am with no real, and monetizing my haters and all that sort of stuff without having some regard for the impact on your users, then I think that you need to pause and think about that, right? Hang on, I'm not sure. I'm talking, so the chat might not be showing up, but yeah. So TweetDeck's and the like, as far as the eye could see, is what Matt said, and he's correct. Hang on, I think it popped up. Let me just check. Yeah, so it was an idealist thing, but then eventually, every tech bro and idiot with money decided that what they would do is set up a platform so that you could manage your social media. Okay, they were doing it. And again, this was another problem of, it's probably only sort of not really related, but it's somewhat a point, which is that people in this industry tended to be early on focused too much on tools and not enough on strategy. So there was always new tools, new shiny tools, new shiny tools, new shiny tools. So it was always about, as long as I find the right, there was probably about 3 or 4 years, as long as I find the right app, I'll be able to manage this. And it got to a point where, and then obviously every dipshit with a bit of money saw an opportunity in building a platform or an app. And so eventually you'd have those things where, you have different tools running lots of different things. You've got so many subscriptions. Like, I'm sure everybody here knows how many subscriptions you've got. Everything now is a subscription. And so it started to cost a lot of money to maintain. And so the value proposition, okay, so the buzzword of the day was ROI, return on investment. The return on investment on social was high in the early days, okay? You would get an ROI for, very little money, one or two FTE, managing a social media account. It was just banter. But then fuckwits moved in, fucked it up for everybody, capitalism did its thing. And, we became awash with bollocks advertising agencies who were supposed to be disrupted, tech bros who were, already rich, who were building these products without strategy in mind. I actually, I was going to build an enterprise grade social product. So I know, I built an MVP on this very, very thing. So I know how what a good one looks like, because mine was a good one, but it didn't get funded. So a lot of the VCs and the sort of funding and the money was going to the quick grab for money rather than the good tools, right? Which was strategy first, tools second. They just wanted to sell the tool. They wanted to sell the tool. They wanted to sell the tool without thinking about the bigger picture or the broader impact or anything like that, okay? That's what corporations do. It's bottom line shit, ROI. But eventually, over time, the ROI shifted to, first of all, Twitter turned into dog shit. Like, the reason why my account currently doesn't have that many followers is because I was pretty much out of it. From 2013 to 2017, 2018, and that was when you could have probably had rapid growth, I wasn't checking it because the fuckwit was there. The fuckwit, like Donald Trump was there. Okay. And it was just a garbage the whole time. And it just became toxic. Okay. And it became unbearable. The American politics took over everything. And again, I've told you about this, how I presented at the conferences back in the early days. And I had an idealistic vision of what, how politicians could use social media. Like I literally talked at the Women Parliamentarians Conference about this specific thing called I Tweet and I Vote, a way to engage in terms of community engagement and get ideas of sentiment. Unfortunately, I had no idea what was coming up the fucking rear with the ladder of engagement and those sorts of things. And it had we were naive. We didn't think about it. But now I do think about it, which is that some of this stuff has to be a no-go zone for the industry because it's unethical. It's just unethical. And you can't argue with someone who doesn't have ethics or the same ethics as you why something is unethical. Once you get to a pedantic conversation about like ethics, it's already a moot like conversation. It's objectively wrong to anybody who has any scruples at all, okay, to do these practices because, the harms are apparent and obvious. And that's why, this whole ABC leaving Twitter thing, I mean, I'm surprised that they stuck around as long as they did, but they also weren't leaving. So basically, everyone was like, oh, they're leaving Twitter because they're woke. It's like, oh, you idiots. No, they're consolidating their accounts like they should have in the first place. And they're still keeping the ABC master brand account. They're still keeping ABC Sports and still keeping ABC News. Now, also, a ton of their journalists have also been subjected to abuse. Dopamine, attack, dehumanize, attack. People are under attack all the time. Women particularly, it is poisonous. People feel like, people really forget about Charlotte Dawson. I've talked about that before. Okay. Talked to her before, like trying to get her, talk her off that ledge. Okay. Literally. It's like, has real consequences. So monetizing your haters has real consequences to it. And it is a perfectly normal human response to not want to use that platform as it stands. Okay. It annoys me. And I'm an internet, I'm an old troll from years ago. I can handle anything. Okay.
And I will not let you down.
But it's just like, but it's not even what happened. And then Elon Musk comes in and he's just acting like it's some fucking culture wars thing. And it's like, no, he just can't, you don't think he's not going to incite his followers onto the ABC and thereby prove their point. It's like, what the fuck? Anyway. But remember that also ABC is a public broadcaster. First and foremost, they have to operate in the public interest, but also you have to remember what the sell was, which was that it would be low resource, that they could reach an audience, okay, a new audience, that they could, that it was win-win, that they could have fun doing it, and that it was sort of low thing. But it became resource intensive. And also other platforms became available that were more suited. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, right? These things, they became more appropriate for ABC than Twitter. Twitter is not the right platform. And this is Digital Strategy 101, which is that you go where you look at where your audience hangs out. You don't just do it because you like it or because you prefer it and hope your audience shows up. If you're actually being strategic, this is Taya talking to herself again, okay, which is that you need to go where your audience is. I mean, I have no audience now because I've been so mass reported by all the fucking troll farms. I'm like the most shadow banned person on that fucking platform, I swear to God. Somehow I've managed to get on all of their bad sides, but just by being me. But, like remember that the platform, the landscape shifted, and that's good strategy. So what I would advise for somebody with, if they'd come to me and said, all right, we need to audit our social media, I'd say consolidate your accounts, only have like 2 or 3 FTE, use filters, only use it purely as broadcast. Like that's been pretty much the approach that I recommend for most brand accounts now with social media, is to just not engage and to just use it for purely broadcast and just turn notifications off. Now, the problem is ABC were also subjected to a high court case, okay, where they were deemed responsible for the comments that appear in their Facebook posts, okay? It's a landmark ruling. My brain just farted about the name of it because, of course, it did, because I didn't actually write it down because I'm a fucking idiot. But that high court case, okay, ruled that's the highest court. Sorry, for those that are international, the high court here is the highest court in the land. It's our Supreme Court, okay? We that basically ruled that media outlets, or by proxy, Facebook page owners, are responsible for any defamation or speech that happens in their comments. Okay, it's not Marbo, but yeah, okay, you funny fuck. So basically, like the ABC, there's a point where X becomes a liability, because you've got to sit there and yes, while the cases are different, the platforms are different, you can't necessarily control your replies as X. So remember, you also got to think about the functionality of the platform. So as long as Twitter didn't allow you to control and mute replies and responses, okay, like Facebook does, like Facebook allows you to delete and reply, okay, Twitter introduced features where you could mute replies, hide replies, make it so that only people you follow can reply. You had those sort of controls. That's a trigger for a different strategy, which is to because then the second that they start to have to, even though, and like some idiot argued with one of these Musk accounts, these idiots argued that it's Facebook, so it's not the same. It's like, you fucking moron. I said, no, you've got to take, you got to take what the argument was, the legal argument in that case. And as soon as Twitter allowed you to control the replies and responses and curate those responses, you are responsible for those third-party comments and responses. And based on the cost, based on the fucking effort, based on the fact that their journalists are getting abused, based on the fact that they're now on the hook for yet another defamation suit, because I can guarantee you, Twitter is the defamation network, okay? That everything is actionable all the time, 24/7, and people don't realize it, and I just hope they do. I hope they fuck around and find out at some point. But right, they had control over the replies now, and they've just been found that they're liable for their Facebook comments, and they now have to be responsible for Twitter on top of Facebook. No, why would you do that? I wouldn't. Right, it's hard enough for me, and I'm pretty I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to this sort of stuff, fast and loose, and I'm at the sort of fringes of the internet because I'm old school. But from a corporate point of view, and just a pure risk point of view, in terms of the risk of lawsuits, nobody's thinking about the fact that their legal department would have said, here's the risk has changed. That a good legal department, that's a whole other thing. Assuming that they're getting the right data and information, their processes aren't that great for surveying and making decisions. But let's just assume that they've got good advice. If they were getting good advice around these things, I think you'd be, again, as one of those good advice people who left because I couldn't do it anymore, I'm going to assume they're not getting that much great advice. They're not terribly good at this stuff, but that's okay. They're getting better, but they're still extremely tactical in the way that they approach it. But the good advice that they would have is that they are now exposing themselves to a repeat of that Facebook case. Fuck, I wish I could remember what it was called. It's in the it's like motherfuck. Hang on. ABC High Court case. Give me a sec. I think it's just at the tip of my tongue. It's like Bolton, or I've been reading too many cases lately, and it just left my brain. Vola, the Vola defamation suit. You can look that up. But yeah, so Vola, of course. I was thinking it was V or B, and it was either Bolton, and I was like, no, Vola. Too many things going. I've just finished law school, and I've had a different part of the law. So too many things in my head. So the Vola case, right? So that was, you got to look that up, and that it's not. This is the problem with these fucking tech bros as well, which is that they have this Dunning-Kruger thing where they go, well, I understand the law. It's like, no, you don't, because you understand that that cases apply creatively to other cases. It's not just literally that, that narrow interpretation. Once it gets to the High Court, you're creating pretty much an expectation that they're going to rule in a certain direction in future cases, especially further down. Okay, so they're going to be taking Vola. If someone sues ABC for defamation on X or Twitter, and they can control the replies, chances are that they're going to get a ruling that says that they are, because they can control those replies, because that was the intention behind that decision, that because they're able to, they are able to moderate. As soon as you're able to moderate, you have like liability for that thing. Okay, yeah, well, this fucking Dunning-Kruger shit, man. It's like they're given such a large platform because they're sucking Elon Musk's dick, and they're giving really stupid information. And it was like, there's this Australian tech news account that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. But because they branded themselves as X News, even though their news is stupid and doesn't actually give any, he basically just screenshots Elon Musk tweets and calls it news. There's no real analysis in there, and it's like, yeah, I argued with one of these guys, and I was like, Vola will tell you why they're leaving, and also they're not leaving. They're consolidating their digital strategy because it's costing too much. So the ABC basically just said, this has become too cost intensive. The ROI is not there anymore. Our journalists are being harassed. Also, I imagine that, they've had legal advice. Because they don't want to say so. Generally, they don't say it publicly, but there's internal documentation that says, in the wake of Vola, I think we should recalibrate. Okay, I think we should focus on, now that we can control those replies, this is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. Fuck it. It's not in the public, really in the public interest for us to be, and also not to mention occupational health and safety. So with content moderation, you've got, it's a pink collar industry. Okay, it is a offshore. Most of the moderations and it's highly exploitative, highly toxic, highly traumatizing, highly injurious. Like, it's just a lawsuit waiting to happen as well in terms of occupational safety and health, because the social media managers themselves have to be subjected to constant streams of abuse, not just the journalists. Okay, so the journalists are public figures. Again, I'm not saying that being a public figure makes your abuse of them acceptable. I'm putting it on you. They need to accept that there's people who have no boundaries and no fucking ethics and will use you as a punching bag. That's on them, but it's on you to not feel entitled to abuse people just because you're hiding behind a fucking anonymous account, and just because you see them on the TV and you think, oh yeah, let's tear them down. I've experienced that. It's not pleasant. Okay, that is horrible, and it has driven friends of mine to suicide. Stop it. Stop tearing down people, especially over culture wars shit that's not true and doesn't exist and isn't real. It's made up. It is clips. What a load of old shit. But it's like, stop being a fuckhead, right? And it's like, but it's horrible. But what do? If they hire most of the people who do manage social media accounts, they're young, they're interns, or they are juniors. They are not people like me who are 30 years on the internet, arguably fucking maladjusted as a result. I'm an extremely rare person who has managed to keep my synapses intact and still do the career that I've done. And that's because I have a very healthy, integrated like approach to it. And even then it gets what gets to me. If I was a lot less mentally healthy or emotionally healthy, I'm sure there's people that would question that, but I'm saying I am. There's people that are a lot more vulnerable, who are much more sort of able to have their triggers like trampled on daily. You know, it is unbearable. It is abusive. Why would you willingly subject your staff to that treatment? Not only just ethically, but also it's against the law. It's like becoming an OSH issue or an OHS issue. It's like basically, why would you, if you knowingly like put someone in charge of an account that has death threats attached to it. That's why they offshore this stuff and content moderation, because they are off the hook for the occupational safety and health. They use, layers and layers of some subcontracted firms so that they have plausible deniability. It's much like the sweatshops thing, right? Where the sweatshops, Nike don't run sweatshops, Apple don't run sweatshops, but they do have, small operators that run sweatshops that contract to a sort of medium-sized sweatshop that sort of they sort of launder that sort of stuff, that terrible work stuff through a few different companies so that they can just go, no, we didn't know about it. It's plausible deniability stuff. The same thing is happening with content moderation, where Facebook actually, and, a lot of these places, even Amazon and, places like that, they outsource a lot of the ugly parts of their business because that strategically as a risk, they do that. I mean, I'm not saying that there's another way, but they do that to limit their exposure to the other stuff, right? That's, again, it depends on what lens you look at, okay? I would say, well, you should deal with the labour practices and root cause. But I also go, well, if the lawyer's job is to protect, again, I see things from a different point of view, because it's like, well, the law, your duty is to your client. And so, it's one of those complicated things. I'm trying not to sit there in judgment because some jobs are horrible but necessary, right? Like, police, those sorts, all those sort of dangerous jobs, the shitty jobs, and social media and content moderation and those sorts of things are shitty jobs. This is, I don't know why I do it for different reasons, because, I don't have a choice, but if I had a choice, I'll fucking do something else. I do it because I'm probably a masochist. There you go. There's the mentally unhealthy part. Breaking Elon fart. Yeah, I know, it's like that, isn't it? Fucking hell. And that's why I do try to sort of push through and do some actual analysis. And this is analysis. Of course it is. It's very serious analysis. But I do try to at least distill and go, no, they're not because, people are just, everything's broken. It's crumbling. We're sort of at the, again, I would say it's inevitable, and it's, because, Marxist analysis tells you that it goes in a certain direction and history travels in a certain direction if you don't address it. I'm not pro-revolution per se, I'm pro-revolution. I'm not pro-violent revolution, but I also believe that it's necessary. Let me rephrase that. I'm not a pro-violent revolution person. I'm a pacifist. I don't want violence, okay? I don't believe in violence. The people who want violent revolution, I understand their anger, but I don't think they understand quite what that means and what that looks like. But I also think that there comes a certain point with capitalism where if you don't address the issues, this is the Rosa Luxemburg, you either end up with a violent revolution or you end up with fascism. And we are really at that turning point. I don't think people understand that we've been at that fork in the road for quite a while, and it's getting worse, okay? And that was that thing that Cornel West said, which was basically like the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans because they're the ones that are sitting there letting fascism happen and dropping the ball and pretending everything's fine when it's very much not. And they're just continuing with this sort of corporation-led, techno-fascist insanity that we are living through right now. It's, it's on them because they have the ability to stop it, and they don't. And that's even worse. Like, if you're someone who has the ability to stop something and doesn't, then, Yeah, I mean, I don't focus on everything because I don't have the ability to stop things, but this is within my control to talk about. So I do. I only focus on the things that I can have an impact with, and my impact is decreasing rapidly. But just because you've got culture wars brainworms doesn't mean there's not a good reason for shit. And it's so fucking frustrating. It's obvious that it's just not. I haven't even talked about sort of ad spend and how I've talked about it before. Let me refer you to the ad spend fraud. The ABA. My brain is. I swear to God, my fucking brain. Since I tend to do this, which is I forget. I fall in a heap for about a week every time I finish a trimester or semester or whatever of study, because like my brain just turns to mush because I'm juggling. I'm just like, as soon as uni finishes, something happens in my body where it just goes. So I apologize. So I'm a bit burnt out, but it's yeah. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say, but I think you've got to remember that like social media isn't what it used to be. Like I'm going to be changing and pivoting a lot of what I do as well, right? Because I've just accepted the fact that I can't swear. Like my account, like I've learned from this. Like I messed up. Like I didn't know. I didn't know the rules had changed. No one felt fit to actually tell me. Like if I got it wrong, then a lot of people got it wrong, and a lot of people got it wrong. Which was that if I feel kind of somewhat responsible because I was one of those early people who would say that if you were a little bit edgy, then that's your best selling point. But what became acceptable as edgy has really narrowed. And, I can't swear anymore. I am mass reported, like repeatedly, like nonstop. I'm sitting with X because I love the product, but I've said before, it doesn't give me any real value in terms of actual value. Now, it may, now that my ad account's back on, because I can pay to promote things. Okay, so when I'm ready to sell courses and sell my shit and do the stuff, I can then, obviously, pay for ads at some point if I can make enough money to pay for the ads, become a patron. But it's not. I mean, Facebook let me travel. Like Facebook seems to be, and Reels particularly, everything that I've put on there, Facebook is happy to just like push and share. Like they've done really well. Like, but X, I'm absolutely, completely shouting into the void. Same with YouTube. I don't know what's going on with YouTube, but I think YouTube's a different beast because I'm not doing clips and I'm not really dedicating enough energy to the actual channel part, and that's on me, right? But with Facebook and Reels, like the second you put effort in to doing it, there is some degree of meritocracy on Facebook that doesn't exist on X at the moment, and I'm only staying on X because I like the product. I believe in the potential of the product, but on any given day, I'm pretty close to calling it a day because, like I said, that ROI is not there for me really either. Like at the moment, because like no blue, nothing. I'm capped at 200 views. Like I'm obviously in the algorithm pit of doom, having done like I don't know what the hell I've done. I can't contact anyone to fix it. I don't know what to do. It's just I'm waiting it out and hoping that when they remove tweet cred that the levers will be taken off. But I can't contact anybody. I mean, there is progress in that they re-enabled my ad account, which before when I did that they actually said it's because you're swearing and blah, blah, blah. And but I put in I went and actually had to delete 10,000 tweets. I didn't know the word cunt was hate speech. No one told us that. No one told us specifically what those things were. That was an American. They're like, well, you should know what you did. No, I don't. I'm Australian. Cunt's not hate speech here. Unless you're mental. Unless you're a mental head case Christian conservative, cunt is a funny Australian word. And it's like, okay, so I've basically been saying the N word for 15 years straight, and no one told me. And, that's not fair because I wouldn't have done it. Because I actually I built my brand on that word because I was like, I've written about this before and told you about it before. I literally built my brand on that word. And Twitter were fine with it. And then at some point, the Americans moved in, the CCDH and all of the, Dwight Schrutes and Helen Lovejoys of the CCDH who are offended by fucking everything. And like the journalists moved in and like everyone henny pennied over the C word and no one told me because I obviously had a break as well. So I hadn't see, the thing is, if I hadn't taken that break, I would have learned pretty quickly that I wasn't, I would have noticed. But I just sort of showed up back in 2017 to defend Megan Murphy, much to my fucking mistake. If I had been using it, I would have known, but I wasn't really using it much. People weren't using, like most of the people that I had advised to use Twitter over the years had decided that it wasn't worth it because, again, the ROI had gotten too high. They'd needed too much staff, too much effort, and it wasn't really returning. Like Twitter's always had that problem in terms of generating enough money and enough eyeballs that will actually spend money, not just generate eyeballs. It generates addicts going dopamine, 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 cortisol, dopamine, cortisol, cortisol, cancel, cortisol. It doesn't actually really attract paying customers. Okay, it never has. They've had trouble monetizing. And it's a spiral because when you have trouble monetizing, you have trouble attracting advertisers. It's just, and because the content is political and garbage, like it doesn't matter what platform you're on. If your content's political and garbage, they're not going to want to advertise next to it. It doesn't matter if it's the freest platform on earth. Okay, it doesn't matter. No sensible corporate brand manager who isn't like me, who doesn't have a lot of fucking like risk tolerance, okay, and isn't if you're not like KFC weapons grade troll, fucking super clever, really good lawyers, really good brand team, really good agency, where all that aligns, and even then it's 50-50, okay? This is like ninja level social media strategy. Like they wouldn't do it. And most ad teams and most marketers and most brand managers and sort of people, they're not really kind of old schoolers like me anymore. A lot of them moved into management and a lot of them just lost their tolerance for risk and they kind of got beaten down over the years. I just couldn't, just because I can't, I'm not socialized with other animals. I'm sort of a relic of the past in many ways, much like Kiwi Farms. I'll talk about that actually the next stream. I was thinking that might be a pre-record, but I never pre-record. But I'm definitely writing a thing. But anyway, so I probably, but it's like, if you, I don't know what people, I don't know what to do here because part of it's I don't know who I'm talking to really anymore because there's the brand managers, right? And like my advice would be for them to hold off on X for now. Like that would be my professional advice with all the sort of legal and risk and especially, the Voller case. I remembered that time because it was front of mind. The Voller case, all of those sorts of like other like forces. Plus, the clampdown on regulation, plus ACMA. Remember, ACMA is a factor here, which is that, like we've got like ad standards we need to abide by. So, on a strategic level, yeah. But even my own content, it's not even about getting paid because you don't get paid much like for ad revenue anyway. And let's assume I suddenly had the shadow banning I'm ghost banned. I'm not even shadow banned. I fucking don't exist on Twitter or X. At the moment, I'm just so fucked by the whole thing. And I'm waiting for the changes to occur and see how we go. It's just sunk costs, really. But even for my own stuff, it's like I'm not swearing anymore. Like I'm not doing anything edgy. I'll try the occasional like edgy joke, but I'm not gonna say anything anymore that will. I'm just sort of laying low. I'm becoming a shadow of, it's kind of everything that my Tealoo brand was, which was fun and edgy and authentic. Okay, that was the biggest part of it. Rapid fire tweet storms and being funny and riffing and improv and that sort of stuff. That has been taken away, and so I had to basically delete all of that from my Twitter account in order to like get my ad account back. So maybe I could sell a few T-shirts where I make $2. And it's like, wow, it's a good system, but you don't make much, right? So even if my reach went up, like despite the screenshots from those bros, like most people aren't getting that kind of reach because that requires you to have a lot of Twitter Blue subscribers as well. It's not just ordinary people, ad impressions. It's actually people who have a Twitter Blue account. So if you're kind of your average lefty who hates Elon Musk, even if you're like a popular left-wing account, most people are, for some reason, opposing to, having Twitter Blue, right? And so they're going to, their impressions and engagement is not going to count. So people, even like left-wingers or, people who don't like Elon Musk, even if you do get that Twitter Blue account in order to monetize your audience, unless that audience feels like they want to sign up, then that does, you're just going to be arguing with non-verified accounts, and that's not actually going to get you anywhere or get you any money. So those people will be incentivized to be arguing only with like right-wingers and people who, Musk fans, and it's just going to become like arguing with Tim Pool rather than arguing with rather than having like constructive conversations with people that are in their community, whether they can afford it or not. Now, again, I understand the reasoning and rationale for it. Like there's no real big solution for this because yes, like it's easily gamed unless you've kind of got the verification. Like I will be doing ID verification because I am okay with that. I don't have a problem with that. And also the horse has bolted with me. I'm on every, I don't give a shit. The horse has bolted with me. They've got all my data. I operated in good faith and it fucked me. I'm just going to keep going and see where it goes because I can only be absorbed by the Borg at this point. So I'm not recommending everyone does it. If you're like young, I wouldn't. But if, for me, my data's I've got no secrets. So it's, I just assume that I don't have anything interesting, but I've got no secrets really, So, well, obviously, there's things I don't share, but if people were to hack, I'm talking about at the data level. If people were to go, what's the Taya database with my metadata and all that sort of stuff? Like, I don't have anything that's really all that interesting. And if it is interesting, I haven't put it online. So there you go. Because I'm obviously not an idiot. Like I've shared things in good faith, and most of the stuff that I've done is exaggerated. I find it funny, actually. I've been waiting a little bit to see what comes back because some of it's made up, because I've always used myself as somewhat of a hyperbolic kind of, making fun of mummy bloggers who overinflate their lives and, make themselves more important than they are. I've done the same thing, but I just play with it and play with that persona. This is a performance, right? A lot of this internet stuff is a performance. My private life is still different to, my online life. But I also don't, I mean, my phone's around me, but whatever. But yeah, so, but it's, it makes perfect sense that the ABC would leave, and it's not a culture wars issue. I'm so sick of this bollocks. So sick of this, all of this, everything melting everyone's brains and everyone having an opinion and everyone having an ill-informed opinion. It makes sense. And even just dickheads arguing with me about Vola. I was like, well, Vola is obviously standing over them on this. They're they were the subject, they were the party to the High Court suit that said you're responsible for the comments because you can moderate them. If you're on X and you can moderate comments, guess what, ABC? You're liable. And it's a fucking platform. It's about defamation. It's not that hard to... And this guy just argued with me. And it's like, Is there any point doing any work ever? Or can I just sit there and make stuff up loudly? And it's like, it took me a couple of weeks to get to stream on this because I'm too busy doing the actual reading and actual work. It goes into these things. And it's like, oh, well, monetize your haters. Let's just say shit and collect the money. It's like, I don't know, why don't you reward expertise? Why don't you reward a slow burn? Why don't you reward quality rather than engagement? Because we all know that, like, there's an inverse relationship between the quality of these things and the ethics and, like, getting paid. And we all know that it's oriented towards all of those. If you look in any of these mentions, the people with the blue checks are like MAGAs and like Trump supporters and like the GOP and Daily Wire and the post-millennial and Tim Pool's lunatics and trigonometry lunatics and all those fucking idiots, like all of the culture wars people. They're the ones with the blue checks. I've got one too. It's embarrassing, but what am I supposed to do? I'm stuck with these fuckheads, and I qualified for a check mark like in 2012, just as they were like closing the requirements. So that sucked. But anyway, I got it. You can look at that stuff, but I qualified for it, and then they just shifted the rules and never got back to me. And, I was like, well, I was about to get mine and I didn't. And I was like, and then I disappeared from Twitter after that because it became like a cesspool because I didn't have the verification. It became somewhat unusable because I was getting a lot of abuse. So then I just sort of drifted away and became busy because I got, I was actually consulting on a lot of this stuff, and I'd keep an eye on Twitter, but it was just sort of like, whatever. And, so I kind of missed the window in terms of growth, but I was on the trajectory to be one of those annoying blue checks that everyone talks about. I didn't do it. But I just, again, I just fell through the cracks like I tend to do because I'm always sort of at the periphery of things and edging sometimes, not always. But, sitting at the edge of things and sort of, slightly ahead of everyone else and just kind of pushing up against those boundaries because I need to know sort of what those boundaries are. And unfortunately, fuck around, find out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That mass murderer, Karl Marx?
Anyway.
It's a peddling.
Where is it? Did it happen or didn't? I don't have it here. That's stupid. Oh, here we go. Yes, I do.
It's a peddling.
Okay, I think that's a time. That's a sign that Taya should go. The computer's held up a little. I've just got to move everything over, and I have all my buttons and everything on this computer, and it's like now I got to migrate everything, and it's like it's so much effort. But I'll get there. I spend all day every day just spinning my wheels and stretching myself thin, but I'm doing the best I can. I am working on my website, like piece by piece. I have been working on things behind the scenes, but every time I go to work on it, I find some sort of drama or issue or something that sort of sucks some time. So I am getting there. But, if you, in the meantime, you can support me on Patreon, or you can flick some money my way via PayPal if you're feeling super generous, sugar daddies. But otherwise, it is coming, and I am going to start providing a bit more value. I am conscious of the fact that my Patreon's pretty much dead and it's just sort of donations at this point, but I will make it right, and I will make it right with patrons who've been with me since for the last few years while I've been shouting and screaming into the void and unable to grow. So I appreciate it very much. And especially Matt, who's, not especially Matt, because all my patrons are valuable to me, but Matt, I'll give you a shout out because you're on my my pervert tier, my pervert tier. And I appreciate that. That's really cool. Guys in tech, you should get more. Get more of those. Find more guys in tech and go, she's awesome. She knows a lot of stuff. And get me 10 more of those and I'll be happy. But no, I'm saying every patron it matters to me. And if you can't at the moment, because everything is so everything, I don't know how people are living. Please don't feel like you have to apologize if you can't do it. I feel one of the things I feel frustrated about is that people feel the need to tell me that they, apologize. It's like, my God, people can't afford their rent. Everything is insanely expensive. People are being choked. Like they're in a chokehold, like all day, every day. I feel it too. Like we're hanging on by a thread. Everyone is. And so please don't feel bad if you can't afford it. Okay. I deeply appreciate it. But if you can help and if you're balling, then obviously, it does help me a lot because I can't grow. I have no reach. I have nothing at the moment. And the only way that I can get reach is by paying for ads. And the only way that I can pay for ads is if I have money, and I don't have any money because I'm too busy trying to stay afloat. But we're getting there. Okay. But I'm doing the best I can on my own to build a website, my community, my courses, write every day, try to show up on streams. And also studying, the law stuff and, and not to mention all the research work and things like that go into, I know that it may look like these streams are sort of off the cuff, which they are for the most part, but I do have to do, days and days of prep for every topic because I do try to make sure that I've done the work, like remembering Vola, the name of Vola, that case, Vola. Yes, and do join Matt's cheese cult. Cheese is great. Join the Aldi cheese cult because the Aldi cheese cult is cheaper than other cheeses. And Aldi actually has really good cheeses. So anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. Thank you for joining me in the void and spending your precious life seconds if you made it this far. And thank you. I'm going to try, I don't know whether, let me know if people want like a patron thank you screen. A lot of people do it. I consider it like a bit weird. Like I don't want my name on there if I'm a patron. I find it a bit weird and embarrassing. But if I can do that sort of thing. But obviously it's just, I bite things off as I can, as best I can. And I'm one person. I do what I can do. What I've done on my own is pretty impressive when you look at the fact that I didn't know how to do lights. I don't like video. I don't like all these things. I'm just good at tech and good at design and that sort of stuff. So I've made it work, but I just need to sort of get to the next. Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for sticking around. Matt, I appreciate you. I thank you and I appreciate everyone. Thank you for all of the things. And I will be, yes. I know I said that I was going to stream more frequently. But I'm trying to just get more written stuff out there, but I'm just burnt. Like I have to remember, I keep forgetting. This happens every time. Whenever I was studying my undergrad and everything, whenever a semester ends, I'm dead for a week. Like I'm just dead and I just want to sleep and like my brain doesn't work. It doesn't work most of the time, but it doesn't work. But I also I've been slipping more into spending too much time on social media again, and I need to like detox again from that shit. So I'm going to do that, and that will mean that I will be more prolific in my writing. If I'm going to start, I might put the Freedom app back on my devices. I might pay for it at some point and put that back on my devices so I can get shit done. But yeah, anyway, and also client work, on top of all of that other stuff, the people who pay me money to do stuff, they need attention from time to time as well. So I'm going to go, I love you. See you next time. And that should be soon. I may do a weekend stream. Let's see how we go, but I won't commit. But yeah, thank you. I love you. Thank you. I'm supposed to say this. Paul tells me off if I don't say it. Thank you for your precious life seconds, although I did say it already. All right. Love you. Bye.